is working. Okay. So, good evening, everyone. I'm going to get down to business. We are moving into chapter 3 of Eduyot. And as I gave this morning at the end of last week's session, chapter 3 is going to introduce more concepts that seem a little unfamiliar. We'll take them in turn. Most of them are not critical that you memorize today. Most of them don't have immediate life application in their particulars, but hopefully general understanding, like many of the other Eduyot, they will be helpful for us as we study it. So, with that in mind, is my volunteer still volunteering?
Yes.
Okay. All right. So, Eduyot, chapter 3, Mishnah 1. Just give you a little bit of a heads up. What this whole Mishnah chapter, Mishnah 1 is about is going to be the issue of Tumah and Tameh once again. Right? That is the issue of ritual impurity and non-impurity, right? Or ritual cleanliness. And we're going to reintroduce the notion of the ohel, the tent, which you may remember when we bounced around this topic before, is sort of the idea that if you have a building and you have something that colors, if you got something that is ritually impure, right, that it bounces off the inside and anything else in here is also going to become ritually impure. Right? That's one category of what we're going to be talking about. There are other ways to also become in contact with something that is ritually impure. Right? And this, everything inside the house, inside the tent, which is the classic phrase used in the Torah, which is where the Mishnah uses it, and become ritually impure in your exceptions, as we talked about before. But other ways to become ritually impure. One of them is if you are carrying a body, right? Because that body is ritually impure, and if you are under it, then guess what? You are also becoming ritually impure. And you don't even have to be touching the body, just carrying the body above you is enough. Another way to become ritually impure, if you have your little tumor blob there, and you, let's see if I can draw this, and you are the tent, right? So that you are over the top of it, and it is, you're not touching it, but it is encircled, developed by you, then it can contaminate you as well, even though you're not in contact with it, right? Once you become that covering for it. So those are some of the things we would talk about. We'll see if we have to go into more detail as we go. We'll see how this goes.
Once you're ritually impure, if you touch something, does that become impure too?
So generally speaking, depending upon the source of contact or the source of contamination, usually it breaks by passing along. There are other things that can cause that, but usually if you become ritually impure, like say from a dead body in your room, and you go and you sit on something else, you will make that something else ritually impure. But you being in the room with something else won't have any effect, right? So if the time was had just come from being in a car with a dead body, not that I imagine you would, right? He would become ritually impure from having been in the car, even if he didn't touch it. But when he walks into this room, it would not affect anything else in this room until he gets down on something. And then that chair would become ritually impure, right? So there would be degrading levels of transmission.
That'd be the final level then. If you touch somebody, then their chair would not become impure, right?
Some things that are especially susceptible to ritual impurity could still be made non-pure by coming into contact with the chair. Yes. So there's different levels of what it means to be ritually impure. Certain levels of ritually impure you have to eat truma to temple and things like that. So there are some different stages.
Like I was going to get surgery and the people parsing me and I refused.
So not necessarily. Because unless you are a Kohen, it's not an issue. And then secondarily, if you are in need of surgery, medical treatment, you're not just going for cosmetic surgery just for Like, oh yeah, how about a third head? As long as it is medically necessary surgery, you also would not need to worry. Even if you were a Kohen, even if you were a priest, you would still go.
Like rounded bones and like that.
Yep. Of course you would. If your doctor says well, and that's a question of what is the best treatment practice. But if your doctor says the only way to fix your body and the only way to do it is to go to the building and there happens to be a dead person nearby, you go into the building and you are doing it because right now you are really impure. And so am I, and so is she, and so are all of us. Right? There is a presumption under Jewish law that the entire world is ritually impure. So there is no escaping it, literally. Now, Kohanim do have an obligation to still avoid deliberate acts that would contaminate them where they're already contaminated. So Kohanim still don't go into buildings unnecessarily that have in them and things like that. But by and large, don't obsess about this because we have no place to go to be ritually pure. There's no temple, there's no sacrifices. Kohanim have nothing to eat that is given in ritual purity, which will see be an issue later on. And that is primarily because there is no way to actually render anybody 100% ritually pure at the moment. Even going to the mikvah ain't enough. Going to the mikvah will make you kind of ritually pure, but if you step outside, you're back normally ritually pure. But more importantly, all of us are considered to have become ritually pure in contact with the dead, so we don't know where the dead are. And there's no way to fix that unless you have water that comes from the river. And there's no river, which means all of us are permanently ritually impure until we're ever concluded. And so far, luck with the cows.
Now, what's up? Sometimes
Right.
Let's say that
So two different questions. Can we become ritually pure? The general answer would be yes, but meaning that one person could become ritually pure, but chances are that wherever they are standing, they would become ritually pure immediately afterwards. You would have to go to great lengths to create something that was definitively a ritually pure area. I'm thinking it's got to be in a blimp or something. And there's other construction that we could do or identification of areas, but it would be quite difficult at this stage in history. So it's possible, but unlikely. The second question you asked is, let's imagine somebody absolutely was 100% ritually pure, and where they were was 100% ritually pure. Could they offer a sacrifice? And the short answer is, not unless it's at the altar of Jerusalem in front of the third temple. And that doesn't exist. There are some very limited on that. It's much more complicated, and in this day and age, much more critical about whether or not sacrifices can be offered in some versions, in some places. The Passover sacrifice being the most argued about type of sacrifice. But the short answer is most authorities do not agree, support, or encourage any sacrifice except at the altar of Jerusalem in front of the third temple. When the Messiah comes and the third temple is reestablished, then we'll know what to do.
And it's not enough to create a cup. We need to read the temple.
So there are some people who believe that the cup of the heifer would be a precursor, would be a sign that we are approaching the time of Mashiach, the time of the Messiah, because without the heifer, what's the Messiah going to be able to do for us, apart from bringing peace? Which is, by the way, I think pretty good enough. We can get the peace, and then we can take care of the temple later. So I wouldn't want to delay the Messiah just because we don't have the cow. But there are many people who say that, yes, there's not much we can do until the cow comes, and we shouldn't expect anything to happen until there is a cow. Like I said, it's not a universal opinion. There is a group of Jews in Israel who are actively training and equipping themselves just in case. So they go through the motions of how a sacrifice would be done. They have tried to create the different items according to their understanding of what the halacha would be for the incense pan and for the menorah and for the wash basin and other things. Whether or not they're right, Mashiach will have to tell them. But they have taken it upon themselves to no small degree of hubris, that they know what it should be. And therefore they want to have the equipment fully loaded, just in case Mashiach surprises us tomorrow and says, "What? You didn't have it ready?" Which, it's an interesting exercise. I'm not a big fan because I think that there are better ways to focus our Jewish spiritual energy. But it seems to inspire them. So who am I to say? We'll find out.
I do recall when I was in Israel, hospitals all have special corridors. Hospitals do contain dead bodies as soon as you walk in, and they have special areas.
Exactly.
Not considered in contact.
Exactly right. And that the Kohanim can still do kohanim mitzvah of visiting the sick, because they are allowed to visit people that are sick. They're just not allowed, except for their immediate people for whom they were born. They're not allowed in the presence of the body. And as I think I mentioned before, the Jewish funeral home up in Baltimore, their the memorial chapel, they have a special adjacent room that is for the Kohanim as well. So that way they can attend the funeral without actually being in the room or technically even the building with the corpse, and that allows them to participate in that mitzvah. Okay, good. So that was a long introduction. Let's get to the first sentence.
Mishnah 1. In the case of all things which cause defilement in a tent,
Such as this.
if the pieces of the corpse were divided and brought into the house, Rabbi Joseph Akankanas pronounces everything under the same roof space clean, but the sages pronounce it unclean.
Okay, so let's get the general idea out of the way, and then we'll look at a few of the specifics. Again, we're not going to try and break our brains to diagram all of this. That would certainly tax all of my artistic skill well beyond its limits. But the question here is basically as follows. The general rule in halacha is that a piece of matter, apart from a few special items, which no matter what it is, it happens, but for a piece of general body, flesh, it has to be at least the size of a beta, of an egg, in order for it to create this type of room contamination. Or let's use transmission. Right? It has to, actually transmission will be helpful in just a second. It has to create at least the size of an egg to create transmission. So the question becomes, what happens when I have half an egg and half an egg? Right? So I've got half of I got half the quantity necessary, and they are separate. They're not lumped together. Does that get counted as being enough to cause the OHEL contamination to transmission, or does it not? Right? So Dorsa is saying, or Dosa is saying here, he's saying, look, this one transmitted and that one transmitted, but it's not enough, right? Each one is too weak of a transmitter to cause the OHEL effect to occur. Whereas the sages are saying, because each one transmits, and when it bounces off the walls, when it gets to the middle, it's the full force. Right? Now that may be a little strange. I can see that you were agreeing with those before we got done.
Yeah.
Which is one of those, no?
No, that's right. Yeah, but because I think it's inconsistent with other that we saw before. We put because the minimum size, you can eat many of the minimum size, and you cannot, it's not equal to the minimum size.
Correct.
So if you take the food, you minimum size, less than minimum size, many, it's not equal to the minimum size. Here, you can inconsistent because you say, okay, if you cut less than the minimum, 2 cups of cut, it's not 1.
All right, so the question is this like eating sequentially, right? Let's say, I had a smaller than the minimum amount of cockroach, and then later on, I have smaller than the minimum amount of cockroach. right? So technically, remember, forbidden, don't go eat cockroaches. But you would not have violated the mitzvah if you ate them sequentially, right, and separately. So the question is piece plus piece, right? Is this two, right? Is this two instances, or because it is one house, one tent, it equals one instance, right? So you give the counterexample, which sages would say, which is fine, but if I have a pot and I'm cooking my stew in it, and I put one cockroach into it, and then I put another cockroach into it, the soup is now, well, if it's above the minimum measure to be a problem, and anything that's done deliberately is a problem, but if it's above the minimum measure, they fall in accidentally, but they fall into the same pot, then the pot would now become pasul. It would not be allowed, it would not be kosher, right? So the question here is, those that are saying each piece by itself is insignificant, and therefore we don't have to worry about it. Sages are saying, yes, but each piece is inside one house, and therefore they combine in this pot to create a significant effect. And that's where the two sides are arguing, which, as you can see, it's a very legitimate debate of what counts as being together, right? If they're not together inside in one room, but they are together within the area that's being affected. And in this case, in all cases, the majority of the sages win, which means that, yes, the effect is cumulative within that.
You need a complete area
You would need, right, if you had a one in this tent and one in that tent, then each tent would not be transmitted. There were fingers that would completely shutting it off from the rest of the house, then that would also be the same. It would also cancel out the effect. Yes, because then it would be in a different zone. And this is all about zonage for the Chacham, for the sages. Okay. Now we're going to get some different examples of how this would work in all combinations. But at the base principle, so hopefully I won't have to
Also, who touches as much as 2 halves of an animal's carcass or carries them?
So if you draw a picture of it, in case, but the bodies of certain animals or died from brave ways, if you touch them, they can also cause. They don't cause the OPEL transmission, but by holding onto them or carrying them, you can get the transmission. They're saying if you have 2 halves of an olive, I said base, olive size, then you can have the same effect or the same situation, or
in the case of a human corpse, you can touch as much as half an olive and over as much as half an olive.
Right, so it's now coming into contact in 2 different ways, but of 2 same degrees of contact. Right, so the same effective transmission, even if it's in 2 different methods. Onward,
or touches as much as half an olive and as much as half an olive is above them, or if he stands over as much as 2 halves of an olive.
Right, we could have 2 different bits underneath here. And part D, one more case.
Or if he stands over as much as half an olive and as much as half an olive is above him, then Rabbi Joseph pronounces him clean, and the sages pronounce him unclean.
Right. So in all 4 of those cases, Joseph says that it does not combine, and in all 4 of those cases, the sages say yes, it does combine. What's that? The sages win the argument. Unless there is an explicit teaching otherwise, or unless in the Talmud it's explained that the sages and the main person arguing are talking about 2 different things, the assumption is the majority wins. We can go by majority rule. And when it's not majority rule, there's a reason why it isn't. Usually still preserves the majority rule as the general trend. In case you're wondering how you can get half an olive's worth of human body in other places, well, it's not uncommon in the worst possible situations. Even in common situations, you can still imagine things when you're the body, you go with the body, maybe cut pieces from various diseases and illnesses, leprosy being the most famous in the ancient world. Pieces can be removed. In modern world, unfortunately, we have found that this is a more difficult problem when it comes to terrorist attacks. Because when terrorists destroy human life using explosives, they scatter the remains over a large area. And there are special teams in Israel that will go in after an attack to try and gather all the pieces of the victims as possible, in order that they can be buried properly, and also in order that their pieces not be left around the environment. Yeah. Okay. It wasn't dark enough already.
But if he touches as much as half an hour in quantity, and another thing was, and over as much as half an hour, or if he stood over as much as half an hour, and another thing was over as much as half an hour.
All right. Going to other variations. Everybody agrees that that would not be a cumulative transmission, because they are two different varieties of transmission. And when you have the two different levels of transmission, one greater level and one lesser level, they don't combine for their equal effects. You need to have two things transmitting on the same wavelength, if you will, in order for their effect to be cumulative. Make sense? Okay.
So Rabbi Meir said, also in this case, like Joseph pronounces it clean and the sages pronounce it unclean, in all such cases, a man is unclean unless there is an act of touching and also an act of carrying, or an act of carrying and also the fact of being under the same roof space.
Right, so he further tries to differentiate between those different types of transmission and therefore contamination, into saying that only those ones combine. However, we do have a general rule which will clear everything up.
The general rule is, in whatever case the means of causing defilement are of one category, he is unclean. If they are of two categories, it's clean.
Right. So this goes back to what I was trying to use the metaphorical wavelength. If they are of the same category, transmitting, then they can combine as long as they are transmitting in the same way. If they are of two different varieties, then they don't combine, and the sages agree that they don't combine in those other circumstances.
So what was above and below different categories?
Well, because above, you are essentially under another sort of makeshift hotel, but it's a open hotel, right? It's an open tent. It doesn't have walls just above you, whereas below you, you are the tent, right? So you are the one who's actually creating the roof. You're creating the environment that causes there to be radiant transmission of impurity rather than through contact. Okay, and again, commentary is very good, especially for explaining all the different forms of contamination. Wish English had a better phrase for it. And if you want to know just a good thumbnail sketch, read the commentary in the USDJ. They do a good job of summarizing how ritual impurity kind of works in these categories without going into so much detail that your eyes will roll on the back of your head. And that was a one. I told you it took a while to get through, but I think we did all right. Let's try Mishnah 2.
First part, food which is in separate pieces does not combine together to receive impurity, according to Rabbi Yosef ben Hannah. But the sages say it does combine together.
And this is what I was remembering. The food is where we talk about things having to be the size of an egg. And what we're talking about here is if you have pieces of food, can they become ritually impure if each individual piece is smaller than the size of an egg, right? You scatter your oatmeal, and so all the little flakes are all over the place, right? You definitely have more than an egg's worth of oatmeal, but does that scatter count as being able to be made ritually impure? Right? Everybody agrees that we're not worried about the ritual impurity of a single flake of oat. But once we've got eggs worth, we are worried. But if it's not an egg worth in a little pile, But if the eggs were scattered, then can it be made ritually pure or not? And again, Dorcas says nope, and the sages say yes. And different topic, but similar issue.
One may exchange the produce of the second time for uncoined metal, according to Rabbi Dosa. But the sages say one may not so exchange it.
All right, I tell a lie, this is not part of the same topic, but it's still Rabbi Dosa and the sages disagree. So when, I think we've talked about this before, we have the second tithe that you need to eat in Jerusalem. Sometimes what you have is too large, too much produce, and so you can't carry it to Jerusalem, right? It's not feasible to do so. And so you convert it to cash, you go to Jerusalem, and you buy things with the cash, and then you eat that in Jerusalem, right? Remember we had an argument about how you convert your shekels and all of that. If you remember from earlier Eduyot. So here, Rabbi Dosa is saying you can even convert it for uncoined metal, right? Nowadays, I know we are past monetary policy that is based off the value of the metal. Back then, they were. Right? So if I had a disc that was the same size as a regular coin, my disc was silver and the regular coin was silver, and you could weigh them and they were both the same. Rabbi Dosa says that counts as money. And the sages say it hasn't been stamped. If it's not an official coin, then when the Torah said it has to be money, it's not money. And so therefore you cannot convert it into unminted metal. You have to convert it into something that is recognized as legal tender, to use the modern term. Make sense? Okay. And then part 3, additional different topic, but back on to ritual purity.
The hands alone need to be immersed in waters of purification, according to Rabbi Dosa. The sages say if his hands have been clean, his whole body is not clean.
All right. So the idea here is whether or not, in the case of the ritual impurity of the hands, if a person needs to do more than just purify the hands, whether or not the whole rest of the body also has to go through an immersion. In this case, it would be a mikvah. And both of these cases of needing it to be done prior to going through the sprinkling of the water of the red heifer. And Rabbi Dosa says, hands by themselves, no problem. And the sages say, nope, you got to do the whole body, even if it's only the hands. Right? The hands are kind of connected. And even though, yes, in general, the hands are considered separate from the body from impurity issues, which is why we do Netilat Yadayim just in our hands, if we don't have to like bathe in the mikvah before we eat bread every time. Even still, for this, we do consider the hands to have ritual purity of the rest of the body, and therefore the stringency, the whole body has to be immersed. Make sense? That one only took like 5 minutes. Wow. What a difference. Dosa continues to argue. 3-3.
The inside of a melon has discarded leaves of a vegetable of Peruma. Rabbi Dosa permits their use to non-priests. Sages forbid.
Okay, so review on Truma. Truma was the special food that was given as a gift by the regular folks to the Kohanim, and that special gift food had to be eaten while the priest was ritually pure, and it could only be eaten by the priests and their families. So the question here is, what about the things that aren't exactly food, that are leftover? Right? So you've got your lovely honeydew melon, and you slice it in half, and the priest chows down on the melon. Well, all that goopy mass of seeds and pulp in the center of the melon that you scoop out and throw in the trash, if I scoop that out and put it on a plate, can I give it to a non-Kohen? And that's the question. Or let's imagine I'm going to be serving leeks or some other leafy type vegetable that has, or like a radish, right? That has big leaves off of it. So I cut off the top of the radish and all those leaves, and then I cook the radish for the priests, and I give the leftover leaves of the radish to somebody that's not a Kohen. People don't normally eat the pulpy seeds. People don't normally eat the leaves. So can I or can't I? That's what they're arguing about, is the non-food items that come along with the truma. Everyone got the picture? Right. And of course, the answer is, Rabbi Dosa, again, through the form says, look, it's not really food, it's conscious food. Therefore, they can eat it. If they want to eat like what animals eat, let them eat it. And they say, no, it can be food, and therefore it's part of the true astringency, and therefore are not allowed to eat. Good? Good.
5 years, their fleeces weigh each mina and a half, are subject to the law of the first of the fleece, according to Rabbi Dosa. But the sages say 5 years are subject to whatever their fleeces weigh.
All right, so first shearing, Deuteronomy 18, the sages understood that there needed to be, Hillel understood there needed to be a minimum of 5 sheep. Then the question became, what was the abundance of their wool that had to be given, right? Well, how much wool did you have? How much wool did you have to wool? How much wool did you have to get from the sheep in order for it to count as a shearing? Right? If I pull off like a couple strands accidentally while just rubbing the sheep, is that shearing? Right? Do I have to take that to the Kohanim? And the answer is no. There needs to be at least it's 100. I think the answer, the conversion they give is about 150 grams worth of wool before you to make this a gift to the Kohanim. But the sages said, no, actually, as soon as you've got whatever you got from those 5 sheep, all of that has to go as the first shear. And there is no minimum. It's just if you shear them, whatever you end up with. 3 hairs, it's 5,000 pounds. Then it's 5,000 pounds.
It's 5 sheep, or whatever comes off of that.
As long as it's an actual shearing, meaning this is time to shear the sheep, not just you're clipping thorn bristles, out the back of one of their wool, back of their legs or something. Or wound a dog. That's like if you've ever had a dog that's running through the bushes and hairing all sorts of little things. Like it gets stuck in the hair no matter what. Okay. Just remembering what it was like. Which brings us now to 3-4. We're moving along.
All mats are liable to become impure by corpse impurity, words of Rabbi Dosa, but the sages say also by midras purity.
Okay, so a quick reminder, midras impurity means that a person who is impure from being a zav or zav, a person who's had a discharge from their genitals in a non-standard fashion, that is a type of impurity as well. It's not as strict as the corpse impurity. It is another level of impurity. Both these cases, however, the question is the item an item that becomes ritually impure? Is it really a vessel? Is it really a finished product? We've talked about this a number of times. We're going to keep talking about it tonight, about what makes an item an item. And so the question here is what makes them an item? And what they're talking about here is that the mats could be the kind that people would be the mats when we're reading them. The mats would definitely be an item that were it in the house, it would become ritually impure because it's clearly a man-made object. However, it's really a used object for something like sitting, which is what midras would require. And the argument here is that these mats, Talmud goes into debate about what type of mats they're really talking about, but we'll stick with the sort of generic version, that these mats are the kind of mats that most people don't sit around on. But some people do. And for the sages, that's good enough to make them susceptible to the ritual impurity. For dosa, it has to be the kind that people deliberately use as sitting material. So it'd be like, in the modern world, we might say like carpet, right? Most of us, we don't look at the carpet and say, there's my chair. On the other hand, I think all of us at one point or another had sat on carpet, and if it happened to sit on carpet, then we were to sit on concrete. And that kind of gives it a seat-like quality. So your rug just or your rug also a seat. And that's what they're debating about. And the sages are saying, because some people treat every rug like a seat. or at least a few people do, that's enough to make it seat-like, and therefore it can become contaminated by the dross, by this other form of ritual impurity, as well as by the corpse impurity. That if it can be contracted in dross, it can definitely be by corpse.
So last week we talked about with the chair, the whole thing,
Breaking it down. Yeah.
Yeah, I remember, and you said there was a test we brought up, does it have to be broken for its intended purpose?
Right.
So, I mean, if it's broken for its intended purpose, what's the difference between carpet and it being for its intended purpose?
So, let me try and articulate this. Well, not articulate. Go back to the math class. Or maybe I should have a math teacher explain this. Right, so there's a graph that might help for working on this, right? Which is, this is the life of the object, right? And this is its usability. When a beginning of life, it's just pieces, right? And it's raw materials and all of that. At a certain point, however, it gets to be usable. And once it's usable, it can contract impurity, but another one it will now it'll break and it'll come down. But really, I guess I should call it like this, right? That most items become usable-ish and then become very usable, full finished form, absolutely perfect in every way, and then they begin to tarnish, fade, break, and at a certain point they become no longer usable. So here we're talking about the start of the journey. What we were talking about the chair, we were talking about the end of the journey, meaning that is the mat something that can be used and will be used by some people at this point for an intended purpose, which is to sit on or lie down on. Whereas when you're talking about the chair at the other end, the question is, would anyone still use it as a chair? And if it would no longer serve that function, then it's now considered broken, even if we could imagine some other function for it. Right? So the intentionality starts off at the beginning, and the intentionality carries throughout its life. So the start when it becomes usable and the end when it becomes breaks, the thresholds are a little different on both sides of that journey.
But the two things. One, I mean, I can imagine somebody using it as a towel rack to the towel. But the other thing, minority opinions. If somebody was really tired, they could still sit on it.
There was an opinion about that they could still sit on it. This isn't saying that it would be an emergency situation. This is saying it is within the realm of intended use among these many people. Right? It's not that, yes, you could hang your towel on it. It's no. Some people do look at that and think of that as a sitting place. Imagine that if I were to take all of you and I would put out a tatami mat, which is the kind of mats they use in traditional Japanese homes. Most of you would look at it and think, oh, that's very nice. And then you would hold over a chair, you would sit down. If I put that in front of someone who's from Japan, they would look at it and they would sit there on my arm. That would be perfectly normal. Or in the modern world, many of them would take cushions and then sit on. But the perception of whether there are enough people who look at it as saying that is its purpose, which is to be sat upon, and therefore it is contaminable. It can be contaminated at that point, is what the argument is here. And Dosa is with you. It says, there aren't enough people, and it's not the normal way to look at that, at least within their community. And therefore, just because somebody can doesn't make it susceptible. Whereas the sages say, no, there are enough people for this to be considered a normal usage, and therefore it is susceptible from this midrash.
So the intent argument seems to be nobody's taking that. They're just saying so many people would do this. The intent of why they make the mat is completely out.
Correct. The manufacturer's intent is not what's important. It is the community's intent, the community's usage that becomes important. And even there, they get the same. There's a certain threshold of normal usage. If it's a small minority, not enough to change how we're going to relate to society. All right. And yes, now we're going to get to a similar similar issue.
All things made of gas are susceptible to impurity.
Yeah, we're a network here, but we think of it. This is like what is it? Flanders for their weaving blades, right? Where you have all the different streams and everything together. Think of like an app for intuition. Things that are made network. So it's not cloth, but it's not all the different strings right tight to each other. It is an open weave of something.
But a network girdle is not subject to it. That's according to Rabbi Joseph. But the sages say they are all liable to cleanness, except those used by women for carrying wool.
Right. So here's the question: is it clothing or is it not clothing? Right. If I throw over my shoulder something that's sort of right, that's all laced and open and all that, does that count as clothing or not? Those that say it does not, right? Except for a special kind of network that people would wear around their waist. But the sages say, oh, even though it's not cloth, like kind of cloth, if it's still meant as something that you wear on your body, then that's good enough to be considered a full item and can be contaminated, except for the special open neck, baggy carrying things that wool merchants use for their wool, because no one's actually wearing that. They're carrying it almost like a sack. And so it has its own different steps. Make sense? Okay. We move on to 3.5.
A sling whose pocket is woven is susceptible to impurity.
Okay. Slings. This is not sling like for a broken arm. This is sling like David and Goliath, right? Although his probably was on the end of a staff. But this is, you have a string, and at the bottom of the string, you've got a pouch, and you put a rock in the pouch, and you throw you let go of one part of the string, and the rock goes flying. Right? And that's actually quite lethal if you know what you're doing. So the question here is, what about the pocket? Right, this part down here that holds the rock. You've got the strings, and then you have the pocket, the two parts of any sling. And the question is, if it's woven, right, can it become susceptible to impurity or not? And the answer, everybody agrees, is yes. Right, if you weave this, like often was done out of flax, linen, we would say in the modern world, then yes, that is a piece of cloth, and it can be made truly impure. The argument.
If it is made of leather, Rabbi Joseph pronounces it susceptible to impurity, and the sages say leather is not susceptible to impurity.
So here they are less stringent, you might say, because they are more stringent on the definition of what a piece of leather is. Which is to say, in other parts of halacha, there is a ruling that for a piece of leather to be considered cloth, like usable clothing or material, it has to be 5 head in size, right? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So you got a sheet of leather like that. Your little cup on your slate is never that big, right? Unless you are, no one has a sling that has a cup of leather that is that size. And so the sages say, because the cup of leather is below the minimum size of leather for us to be concerned with, it doesn't matter if it's a complete item. It's not susceptible to ritual impurity because it's simply too small for us to worry about. Make sense? Okay.
If its finger hold is broken off, it is not susceptible to impurity.
All right. So the finger hold would be at the end of your string. There would be one loop that would go around your finger, and then the other string would be smooth. And when you were spinning, you would let go of the smooth one, and the loop would hold onto your finger, and that was how you would control where the rock went. Right? Otherwise, you would just be throwing the whole thing in the air. So you would need to have that loop for it to work. And because you needed the loop, if you break the loop, you no longer have a sling. You now have string and pocket, and that's useful. So therefore, once you take off the loop, the entire thing is now a broken item. And as we talked about before, once it's broken, it's no longer susceptible to impurity.
But it's anybody that's doing kill somebody that bites something, throw it in the road, it's impure?
No. Unless I'm in the same room. Right? But if we're out in the field and I use the bow or I use the gun versus a spade, it does not make it impure. Yeah, because I'm at a distance from the body. If I'm over you, that's different issue. If I'm in the same room with you,
the spring of the impure and all the person was impure before and used
yeah, I mean, if I had, for some reason I took getting off of a dead person, right, and I borrowed it from someone else, then yeah, it would not make me ritually impure because it was on the body. But if I was next to the body, I probably would have become ritually impure anyway. While digging through his pockets. It's war, these are not toys. I know people think of slingshots as being toys, but these are weapons of war. And something, by the way, to remember when you see the news about the situation in Israel, when they talk about people firing slings at the Israeli soldiers, and they say, Israeli soldiers shot back with machine guns. It's like, yeah, this is a machine gun, I agree with you, but this is absolutely, that's why armies for thousands of years, and in many cases were considered more useful than bows and arrows because you could get a lot more people to use them a lot more cheaply, and you could hurt an awful lot of people. And when the shepherds and others would use to drive away wild animals, keep the wolves and the lions away. So yeah, you do not want to get the wrong end of someone who knows how to use a sling.
But if the string hand only is broken off, it is susceptible to impurity.
Right, but if you break off this part, you can still not use it well, but you can still use it, and therefore it is susceptible for ritual impurity. It may be impaired, but it's not broken. Make sense? Yes, good. Okay. That's a lot about slings. All right. 3-6 is going to, I'm sure, ruffle feathers.
A female captive may eat of teruma, according to the words of Eduyot and Mishnah. But the sages said, there is a female captive who may eat, and there is a female captive who may not.
Okay, so remember teruma, right? This is the food for the Kohanim. And the Kohanim and their family can eat it in ritual purity only. A Kohen's wife is kidnapped. That's the situation we're talking about. She's kidnapped, and then she comes back. Is she still ritually pure or not? Which basically means, has she been raped or not? Right? Well, Eduyot says it's okay. Right? If she goes and she can come back and she can still eat the truma. We presume that she is still not raped. But the sages say sometimes and sometimes. But how they make the distinction is going to be very different.
The woman who said, I was taken captive, but nonetheless I am pure, she may eat. Because the mouth that forbade it is the same mouth that permits it.
All right. So the woman comes home and says, you'll never guess what happened to me yesterday. I was captured by bandits and I escaped and they didn't do anything to me. She can still eat the truma. Why? Because there was a general principle of Jewish law, not only in these types of cases, but in general, that if the person first makes a statement that creates a forbiddenness or an obligation, then we believe them, they also mitigate that same issue. Right? Because she could have kept her mouth shut and not told anybody that she had ever been abducted. So as soon as she said there was a problem, and then she said, well, it's okay, because she was willing to admit that there had been this abduction, we trust her when she says, but they didn't rape me.
And what happened when you knew that she was captive and she escaped?
Read the next sentence.
But if there are witnesses who declare that she was made a captive, and she says, nonetheless, I am pure, she may not eat.
Right. So if her captivity is known by other sources rather than from herself, then we don't have an assurance that she wasn't raped because there was a presumption in the ancient world that that's what bandits did, right? They didn't say, oh, we'll get a higher price for our kidnapped victim for our ransom if we don't abuse her. They wouldn't be able to control themselves, and therefore, unless we have good reason to believe otherwise, like her own testimony in the right circumstances, we assume that unfortunately she must have been raped during her captivity. And do notice, by the way, this only applies to the Kohanim. Right? The Kohanim had very particular rules regarding the Truma, and that is the only case where this is applicable.
How many witnesses does it take to rebut her testimony? Can a single witness do it? Let's say
Nope.
her and her friend were captive, or even two witnesses cannot rebut her testimony.
You would always need the witnesses, but I mean, you would actually have to have witnesses to the rape.
Right.
Right? You can't just, if she comes home and says, I was abducted, but they didn't do anything to her. And two people go up and say, man, did you see that Mrs. Cohen? She was abducted yesterday. And you know, the people who took her, they're the notorious rapers.
Right.
It doesn't matter.
But that's what she said.
Right. If they come and say, and we saw her being raped, then that becomes a different situation.
So like if they have her and her friends in the same room.
Right.
One friend would be enough.
No, yeah, if there were three people,
Yeah.
and one said we weren't raped, two said yes we were, then it would be a bit of an issue. It's the fact that in general, we don't accept women's testimony in the ancient world. Right.
And if she died, she received any punishment. She said, oh, I was captive, but I escaped, and nothing happened. Someone don't say, oh, no, I saw that something happened.
Right.
Because she knew the law. Right? So is there any punishment? Because she was lying?
So not that I can recall. I can't swear that there isn't, but I don't recall reading about a particular incident like that. I mean, obviously, she would no longer be from the Truma if there was reliable testimony.
At all.
Not at all.
At all.
Now, the situation regarding rape of people within the Kohanic line is very extreme because of the issues of purity with regards to the temple and all of that. The Kohanim had really kind of a parallel track of ritual purity that was different than the track that the rest of us had to follow. And so their laws were not always the same laws that the rest of us dealt with.
Yeah, because the women is not affect nobody else. It's herself.
One would think.
No one stopped the company.
So maybe we'll need to wrap that up because the next one is more complicated again because there's a very interesting tension, not just about women, but in general. Although the issue of women comes out more clearly in Book of Sota and the story of the woman suspected of being an adulteress. Of how much do you teach people about how the halacha works if they're not studying in order to be sages? So obviously you teach people the commandments and you teach people the mitzvot, but do you coach them of what to say before the big din? Do you go around telling people you want to win your case? This is how you phrase what you say when the sages ask you for your testimony.
Yeah, it's Torah, still Torah with God. We still need to study the Torah also.
But actually, this is one of the reasons why the rabbis didn't like what we would now call lawyers, because they felt that lawyers wouldn't necessarily lie, but they would often coach the litigants in how to respond to the questions of the Beit Din, of the court, in ways that would give them preferential treatment, because they would know, oh, if I admit this, but then I say that, I'm going to get a better result, right? Because they would know the general principles of how testimony was received. And the sages were conscious of that, right? On the one hand, like you say, you're teaching people Torah, you're teaching people Jewish law, you're teaching people how the court system works, and that's important. On the other hand, are you teaching people to be deceivers, teaching people to twist the system and manipulate the loopholes? And they were reluctant. when it came time for civil, there was a lot of debate about that, about if you educate girls too much, that education may prevent the test from being a valid test, and then they would be under a cloud of suspicion, rather than having the test clear their name. And that eventually was rejected as a major concern, but it was brought up in that discussion.
So the decision was educated.
To the best of their ability, which again, classical times 2,000 years ago, unfortunately, the average person did not think that women had much intellectual capability. So although women were educated, they were not educated at this level because it was assumed that they couldn't comprehend the material, which is a shame. But it does reflect the cultural situation of their day, not an actual Jewish principle that women shouldn't be educated. It is simply the same way as we began, before we began, we were talking about what the sages knew of medicine, how much of what they knew turns out not to be right, because science has shown us that there are better ways to heal persons than putting a leech on them, in most cases. So to our understanding of each other, of what genders are capable of learning and doing, that has also continued to evolve, and thankfully Torah has been right along with it in order to make sure that it is still applicable and relevant. Now that we understand that women are welcome in any class.
But today they are to work because they women are not educated as in every masechot. That differentiation is not applicable.
There is still a strong emphasis in some communities that the study that men engage in is more worthwhile, because it is considered to be more of a chiyuv, more of an obligation for the men than for women. And anything which you are obligated to do, you get more points for doing it than for things you volunteer to do. Which goes back to a certain understanding of psychology that Judaism has had for almost 2,000 years, which is as soon as I tell you to do something, there is part of you that is going to resist being ordered around. And that means when you do it, you're actually accomplishing more. I know we tend to love volunteers and think that, people who just choose to do it out of the goodness of their heart is great. But if you've ever lived with a teenager and you say, eat all of your chocolate, you'll know that they're going to say, I don't want the chocolate. Right? That their natural instinct is always going to be to rebel. And most of us never outgrow that, to be honest. And so as soon as you start ordering people to do things, if they do it, they're actually achieving more than the person who chose to do it all on their own. And so that's why in the Haredi world, for men, because they are ordered to study, the merit of their study is considered greater, and therefore their education is always given a priority, which causes any political and economic effects are not desirable. Even if the idea of study is good for us all is absolutely 100% true, there are certain ways that it is taken that has caused a lot of problems. All right. With that, we will wrap up for tonight. If people have other questions or we can carry on after.